So welcome to Cecil's Unknown Achievers. This is episode number 4. My thanks to those of you who've been listening. If you're joining me for the first time, Cecil's Unknown Achievers is all about hardworking entrepreneurs. So today I'm speaking with someone whose background is in design, specifically in architectural design. She's a graduate from my alma mater, Oak Park River Forest High School, and she's attended and graduated from Ball State. Her name is Maya Bird Murphy, and she's the founder of Chicago Mobile Makers. Chicago Mobile Makers is a nonprofit that offers youth design and problem-solving workshops in the Chicago communities. So, Maya, welcome to Cecil's Unknown Achievers.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join me. So we'll get into more details later, but to start off, please just give me a brief overview of what Chicago Mobile Makers is.
Sure. Chicago Mobile Makers is a nonprofit organization. We go around different communities in Chicago, all over, really any neighborhood. And we do design and design thinking and problem solving workshops. So that could be with groups that are, sorry, I'm messing this up.
Oh, you're fine.
So that could be with groups that are really young, like age 8, or it could go all the way up to people who are age 18. So we could do one day workshops or multi-week engagements.
What led you to start this venture?
Yeah, I think it goes all the way back to when I was living in Oak Park. I grew up there, and as you know, Frank Lloyd Wright is a really huge deal. And I think that subconsciously that kind of soaked into my brain of design and architecture, just because it's talked about so often. And then I didn't decide to go to architecture school until high school, like late high school, when I did a high school camp that had to do with architecture. And then I ended up going to Ball State, which is in Muncie, Indiana. And I don't know if you've been there, but it's very different from Oak Park. The school, Ball State, and the College of Architecture were very white. And so it was kind of culture shock going there. And, we never really learned about architects of color or designers of color. And once I actually got through that and then started working, I came back to Chicago, and I felt that it was actually exactly kind of the same as being in Muncie, where I'm usually the only Black person or person of color working in a firm. So I think that all of these experiences and thoughts kind of came together and kind of formed into Chicago Mobile Makers. And I actually did all the research and development for the nonprofit during my master's program at Boston Architectural College, where I had like a whole year to really gather all of these thoughts. And then it turned into this nonprofit.
So you experience a similar environment with where you went to school in Muncie, and then when you joined the workforce here in Chicago in the architectural industry.
Yeah, I think just being one of the few people of color in my architecture program, I thought that coming back to Chicago would be, really different because it's really diverse. But architecture is, mostly white males. So yeah, it felt kind of the same in a weird way.
Now, how did that affect obviously it didn't sway you from pursuing this, but what kind of things were going through your head at that time after you obviously had some expectations of what you would experience here in Chicago, and it didn't turn out to be that way?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely disappointing, but in school and really in the whole architecture field, there's a very direct path that you're supposed to take. So they tell you very early in school exactly what you need to do to become an architect and to be an architect. And that is that you go to school, you have to get a 4-year or 5-year degree. So you either do 5 years or 4 plus 2, which is what I did because I did my master's program afterwards. And then you have to work a certain like thousands of hours and log them. And then you have to take 6 exams. And that's all to just call yourself an architect. And so I've done everything except for the 6 exams. And so I'm planning to do them at some point. But so there are just a lot of barriers, and that's why a lot of people of color don't can't make it over each of those barriers.
That's interesting. So you certainly didn't follow that typical path as they described it then.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely started, and I think that was the hardest part of this was that Chicago Mobile Makers isn't part of the path, and it was really hard to figure out what I was going to do because I knew that the path wasn't for me. But I also work part time at a architecture firm, but I do marketing, so that was part of me trying to figure out what was better for me. And I knew that I liked doing graphics um, and stuff like that, so I knew that marketing would be more interesting to me. So yeah, I just somehow, I think after this thesis process, found this alternate path and just started walking that direction instead.
So take me back for a minute. You're fresh out of school, obviously seeking to get employed. What was your first endeavor right out of school, out of Ball State?
I worked at a place called Land and Bone Baker, which does affordable housing. And I actually had the job before I graduated, and I was actually graduating early, which is a little bit crazy. But I was graduating a semester early and had a job lined up, so I was very excited to jump into the profession. And as you said before, I had expectations that were a little, turned out to be different in real life.
How did the spark to start the Chicago Mobile Makers come? Were there examples of people doing this elsewhere that you kind of modeled yourself after, or is this a just a totally brand new thing that you started yourself?
Yeah, I can't say that it's totally brand new. It's definitely something that isn't really, there are forms of this a lot of places. And someone that I got a lot of inspiration from was Emily Pillaton, and she started this thing that's called Girls Garage in Berkeley. And that's an all girls program, but like 8-year olds are like welding, which is totally
Wow.
crazy and cool. So I saw her doing this work, and she actually also has a degree in architecture. So I think she was one of the first people that I saw with an architecture degree doing something different. So she was definitely a huge inspiration.
So here in Chicago, what was the, I guess, problem, or outside of the fact that there weren't many people of color as you saw in the industry, what was the unmet need that you saw that you could fill?
I think that leaving Chicago strangely opened my eyes to built injustice. So Muncie is, when you're on the campus, it's a pretty beautiful campus, and but as soon as you leave, there are a lot of houses that are, not in great shape. Um, there's some empty lots, and that was the first time that I realized that, you know, not every place is like Oak Park.
Sure.
And I've traveled a lot, and so I already knew that. But I really started digging deep, I guess, within myself to think about our spaces that we live in and work in. And then coming back to Chicago, obviously the South and West Side, there are a lot of the same issues. So I tried, in my thesis, I asked 2 questions. I asked, how do we help or, improve these areas that are mostly forgotten, by cities, areas that don't have much investment from the city or from developers, and and those areas that don't have much building going on at all. So how can we improve those neighborhoods, and how can we diversify the architecture field and the other design fields, and like, can we do those two things at the same time? And that's how Chicago Mobile Makers kind of came together.
The term I saw as I was reading a little bit about you that popped up a couple times was social architecture. T-
Mhm.
Tell me what that means, and I guess what it means to you and what it is exactly.
Yes, I would define it as architecture that is more involved in, maybe making an issue better, or more involved in, you know, architecture for people and for the public. So in school, we were very often not taught about social architecture. And so an example of not social architecture is like, um, maybe a high rise condo building. Those are being built all over the place right
Hmm.
now. So those are luxury housing. So those are not being built for, the regular person. They're being built for people who have the money to rent one of these luxury condos. Social architecture could be creating this really beautiful, you know, food market or something, where like a bunch of local artisans come and sell their stuff, and there's a bunch of local food being sold there. And so it's much more about people. It's much more about the public, and maybe it's solving. Maybe it's a food desert, and it's solving issues that that community is having. So it was really another challenge coming out of school, was trying to find a firm that was more interested in social architecture, which is pretty hard to find.
It's just not something that you found they were really interested in, and why do you think that was or is?
Well, the reason that there aren't that many firms that are making social architecture central is because there's no market for social architecture. So that's not making anybody money. So it's hard to
Sure.
have a firm that's fully, and some people are really trying, and I know a lot of really small firms that um, are really picky about the work that they do, and it's all social architecture, but it's just a really hard business model just with our current market.
Yeah, I'd imagine if there's not an immediate return, that they probably aren't willing to devote a lot of resources to that.
Yeah, exactly. And developers, their whole thing is to get a quick return. So it's definitely a kind of a big systemic problem.
So how do we change that? Because it's obviously a worthwhile pursuit, but the dollars just may not be there. What can be done to affect change in that area? Your thoughts, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. I don't think it's going to change really anytime soon. I think that we're seeing a lot more like grassroots or um,
Like what you're doing.
small firms. Yeah, small firms, small organizations doing this work, but they're sacrificing some things too. Like, it's not like a lucrative business to do this, and you have to. It's kind of risky in a way. I don't think that things are going to change. I think it's like, it's wrapped up in like capitalism, and so it's systemic change that needs to happen. And so I don't see anything changing in the architecture space for a while.
Well, hopefully the folks that are doing what you're doing create a swell and just grow grow the need and interest, that it somehow develops into something that will generate the revenue that these folks are looking for to make the investments.
Yeah, and actually we've seen really recently the city putting out like requests for qualifications for firms to do work on just the south and west sides. So there's definitely, very slowly some change happening, but that's a really huge thing that just happened when they put out that RFQ.
Okay. Well, there's a start.
Yeah, it's a start.
So I always love to hear like what's going on in the minds of entrepreneurs when they decide to leave what's viewed as security with uh, a job or employment, and then go full time into their endeavor, which is their passion.
Hmm.
Tell me about the time that you were mulling that over and the thoughts are going through your head. It seems like you were very determined from the get go to do this, but uh, I imagine there was a time where you were maybe considering it and not doing it. But you tell
Sure.
me what was going on in your head then?
Yeah, I mean, there have kind of been like stepping stones of getting farther into it, and it started when I was doing my thesis. So I was actually doing my Master of Architecture mostly online, and then working full time, which was already a lot. And then in September of 2017, I incorporated the nonprofit um, while, still finishing school. I finished school in December of 2017. Um, so I was working full time and trying to build this business. And at first it was fine because nothing, we weren't doing that many workshops. Um, I mostly was just working full time. And then, like, less than a year later, I got to the point where I was running around. I was trying to get out of my full time job to go do workshops during the day. And
How'd
so,
that go?
the firm was pretty supportive to a point. So, I could maybe get out during the day once a week or something. But then that, you know, workshops just became more and more frequent. And so I
Which is a
went to
good thing.
yeah, it's great, except when you are trying to keep your full-time job. So I went to the firm and asked to work part-time, and they said no. So I had to make that choice of, do I just keep working here, or um, and the nonprofit was not making much money at all at this point, so it's not like I could have just quit. Um, but I lucked out and actually found a part-time gig, which I'm still doing right now. So I still haven't, gotten to full time at this point. But my current job, they're very supportive of me kind of making my own schedule, and I only work there 20 hours a week. So it's kind of like I have half and half, and kind of make my own schedule and can schedule around workshops and everything. So the next step would be to go full time, which I'm not sure when that happens, especially because of COVID. We were supposed to be really, really busy this past spring. Like, there was one week where we had 12 workshop sessions in like a 5-day period, which is insane. And I don't know how we would have gotten it done, but um, that's how busy we've become. And then now, because of COVID, we're kind of not doing anything except for some pop-ups this summer. But yeah, we'll see when full time happens.
Well, that's very impressive. I'm sure the hours you're putting in on any given week is equivalent to full time, but you're doing it in two different places. So kudos to you.
Probably. Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
so you mentioned the unsupportiveness, I guess, of the first employer, but a lot of things I know I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, they experience is naysayers, not necessarily folks telling you can't do it, but not necessarily being as supportive as you liked. And unfortunately, sometimes those come from friends and family, folks who really do love us and don't
Hmm.
want us to fail.
Sure.
Did did you experience any of that, and how'd you deal with it?
I think that mostly friends and family were really supportive. And I don't know if they knew if I was really serious or not. Like, I would seriously talk about it. And I've been talking about this idea for years. And so they were really supportive, but I definitely have had many people, like especially during thesis, we have in architecture school, you have this thing called a critique where you pretty much present your work, and the people who come, they're usually guest professors or, designers that are local. They come and specifically come to critique your work. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so I got stuff like, how is this a thesis? How is this architecture? Why is this program even a thing that's needed? So that part of it was tough. And then once it actually got into the real world, I've definitely had there's like an ego that's attached to architects. It's just like what happens for some reason. And, this isn't real architecture. So it's looked down upon sometimes. And social architecture is already kind of seen as a lesser or like a lower design. So there's definitely a lot of that kind of stuff out there. But overwhelmingly, it's been really positive and supportive.
Did you use that as a little fuel to kind of fire you ahead?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I've had lots of fuel.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the folks, or the students, I should say, that you're covering 8 to 18 years old?
Hmm.
All right. How do you go about choosing which area or which school, or are they mainly just coming to you and looking for education in these areas, or are you seeking them out to tell them about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, the first few years, it was a lot of like word of mouth, or, I've been in the Wednesday Journal a couple times, and people would email me from that. Or um, one time I was on Chicago Tonight, and I actually got like a couple jobs from teachers who had seen the clip. So
Oh, wow.
it's been really organic so far. And, we've kept busy mostly because people have heard about us or they've seen our Instagram page, and they say, like, it's a lot of teachers who will reach out and say, like, I want this to happen in my classroom. So that's been really great.
Yeah, I know my brother's a teacher, and he's always looking for experiences for the students that
Hmm.
kind of energize them and give them a little fire. I've went to his class a few times over the years to speak to the students about entrepreneurship, and
Hmm.
it's uh it's really fun. I love doing it, and it's something that I'd love to continue to do. The teachers are hoping to engage kids into different areas than they think they can pursue. I don't think there's a lot of belief, as you've probably found, that architecture is something that they can get into, and the thrill
Hmm.
that you get from it. I'm sure you communicate that to them in the workshops that you host.
Yeah, so that's the biggest reason why we go into schools. And you ask how, like, where we go and how we choose school. So usually teachers are reaching out, but we always try to go, like, the target areas are going to be the south and west sides. And then part of the north side too. I think we think of the north side as being mostly white, but there's a huge Latino community. Like, we've been to Schurz High School, and that's both black and brown students. So right now we try to choose classes that are diverse, and that, yeah, you're exactly right. What you said was that a lot of these kids have never thought about being an architect because maybe nobody's really talked to them about it, or maybe they've never met someone who is an architect. So that's the whole point of kind of going into these. It could be a math class, it could be we were in a history class in the spring, and so it's just about exposure.
Yeah, seeing someone that looks like them who's in the field is definitely value added for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me, it seems like you've experienced some tremendous growth in a relatively short period of time. What are some growing pains, if you've had any?
Well, I think the most painful thing has just been, it's been a lot of work. Uh, I don't think we've had growing pains. We've kind of scaled up and added help as we've needed it. So it's definitely, I think the biggest challenge is just being places. Like at one point it was just me and I didn't have any help. And I think I went to over 100 workshop sessions that year by myself. And
Wow.
and so yeah, so that has been the hardest thing, is not really having the money to hire someone. And we actually did hire someone in back in fall 2019. So that was a huge help. But before that, when I was still, part of the time I was still working full time, and then I finally switched to part time. And yeah, just being in the amount of places that I needed to be in was really difficult, especially because we're going all around the city. So sometimes, I was like living in my car practically, because sometimes I had to go from the north side to the south side, right one after another.
Well, these are the times you'll probably remember years from now. It's a struggle now and maybe challenge right now, but I know years from now you'll look back on this and probably smile, and you'll be glad you went through it.
I hope so.
I know you can't see it now, but you will. So you kept saying we. What? How big of a team do you have that works with you?
Yeah, I notoriously say we all the time. And I think I started doing this right at the beginning when it was literally just me. And
Hmm.
I think I was just trying to sound more robust. So I'm just kind of in the habit. But right now it is just me. And we actually have 2 interns right now, summer interns. And we had another program facilitator all of this past school year helping out. And then there are 7 board members that a lot of them will volunteer their time to come in and help facilitate programs.
With nonprofits, one of the challenges is staffing, and the other is funding. So
Mm-hmm.
how are you? You've got a lot on your plate, obviously. How do you balance your time between doing the work and sourcing the funding to allow you to do the work?
Yeah, that's been hard. That's been one of the most challenging things. But my biggest goal for the 2019-2020 school year was to start bringing in more money, and I really focused on that. And since I had help, I could kind of step back from some workshops and think about that. But we're a nonprofit, but we still have like program service fees. So that's actually where most of our funding's coming. So if we're doing more workshops, we're bringing in more money. So and then the grant writing and stuff, that's what is hard to make time for. But we rely on that less than actual program service fees.
So the I mean, how big is the pressure to show results for what well, I guess a step back is what does success look like for you? How do you measure that?
Yeah, I think so far, I think it's been growing and kind of hitting these benchmarks where now we're doing, I think if we forget about COVID, we were doing the amount of workshops that I was hoping for, like
Hmm.
this spring. We were booked. And we haven't talked about this, but we just built out a mobile makerspace. I'm not sure if you saw that
I
or
did
saw
see that.
pictures. Yeah. So that is part of our success, where we had this idea from the start and we've been building towards it and finally finished this kind of huge project that we've been working on for a year now. And then I think that success could be as small as like we go into a classroom and like one person gets inspired by what we're
Hmm.
doing. So that's success. But then I think long-term success is eventually we have a permanent space And we're having workshops like throughout the week. So maybe we have a workshop every day or 2 workshops every day where people can come in and take skill building workshops. So we're also trying to do kind of workshops that build upon each other. So like if you take 3D printing 101, then you can also take 3 more classes in 3D printing, and you've actually, by the time you're done, you've mastered a skill. So that's another way to see success for us, I think, is that if kids are coming in and actually building real skills that they can take out into the world and use as they will.
Well, it seems like there's no shortage of students,
Mm-hmm.
so you can certainly be as busy as you can be.
Yeah, and it really felt like that this spring. Like I was making calendars and trying to fit in more workshops, as many as we could. So I do think that we have to get through this fall and maybe this spring, and I think this school year is going to look really different. But every school wants programming, and so I think we definitely have plenty of kids to reach, and I hope that we kind of create a community of kids that keep coming back, that are want to learn more skills or be an expert at something.
The vehicle, that wasn't a response. You always had that in mind. That wasn't necessarily just a response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Nope. That was actually the piece of architecture that I
Huh.
designed in my thesis process.
I
So
mean,
that
it
was
seems like
always
it's a perfect solution to this
yeah, I know
problem.
it was just very good timing,
Yeah.
honestly. It really was disheartening when we had to cancel or postpone all of our workshops in March, but it actually gave me the time that I needed to finish I wasn't doing the work, but I got to design it and redesign it and really look at all the details, which I wouldn't have had time to do if we had had the spring that we were supposed to. So that was a positive. And then now people are wanting to do things outside, so we can park and we can do activities outside. So that's another positive.
Sure. What do you need that you don't currently have?
It's a good question. Um, I think that this permanent space is going to be, this is one of the big needs um, that we hope to have, maybe in the next 3 years, where, we hope to have this kind of, I've been calling it a hub, where it's kind of like a community center, and it could be a gallery, and it could be a shop, and this kind of multi-purpose space that, we won't have any limits when it comes to tools or workshops. I would say a short term, I guess, and long term need is funding. Like that's just forever, forever going to be a challenge, I think.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I mean, donors and grants, those are all going to be really important for us to continue doing what we're doing.
And you're trying to partnering with the city. That's where the proposals come in, I guess.
Yeah, well, we haven't gotten like a city contract, but um, right now we're partnering with a lot of CPS schools or arts organizations or youth development organizations.
So along with that tremendous growth you've experienced, tell me about some decisions you've made along the way that were great and some maybe that you feel weren't so great.
Yeah, I would say the growth has been I feel like the first year was all about kind of testing the waters, and all of I've written like all of the curriculums for our workshops, and we just had to test those out. So sometimes it didn't work that well,
Hmm.
um, and you just kind of have to go in and see what people are actually going to stay engaged with. So I would say that was probably the biggest challenge. But then I think the second year was all about like experimentation, where we tried out a lot of new things. We did pop-ups. We partnered with the Chicago Architecture Biennial. So we actually got to kind of continue refining our workshops, but then try these new kind of cool things. And then I think like this spring, we were at a point where all of our workshops have been tested. We've done them multiple times with different groups of kids. And so we were just kind of like ready to roll. And unfortunately we had to stop. But
right.
Yeah, I think that we got to a point where we were really confident about our curriculum and about what we were teaching. Yeah.
I guess if there's a bright side to this pandemic, is that it gave a lot of people and businesses the opportunity to stop and think about their approach. And it definitely gave entrepreneurs like you an opportunity to just pause from the busyness and
Mm-hmm.
kind of just reformat things and think a little more strategically about what they're going to do in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that this is the first time I've like rested since the beginning of undergrad. So this is honestly the shutdown has been kind of okay for me, because this is the first time that I haven't been running around or trying to get to work in the morning on the train. And it's actually been the first time that I feel like I'm human again, which has been great.
So speaking of that, how do you balance your time, personal time, family time, and outside of guys like me who are emailing you on the weekends when you're off, but
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't say that I have great balance, but I think that I've tried to make that better by creating my own schedule. So I think that was the biggest thing about working full time, was that I didn't feel in control of my own schedule. And I think that really, like, I took a hit when I was, in an office 40 hours a week. So just having control of when I do things and when I work on things has been huge. And that means that I can easily schedule in time with friends or family. I also like live alone and have 2 dogs, so they're usually the ones that dictate my schedule, honestly. Um,
what kind of dogs do you have?
I have 2 Australian Shepherds.
Are those size of like German Shepherds or?
They're smaller. One's 40 pounds, one's 70 pounds.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're a huge part of my life. And I actually live up on the north side by the north branch of the Chicago River. So it's very naturey up here, and that helps me slow down too. It's right by a bike path and everything.
You got to stop and smell the roses, Maya. You got to do it.
Yeah, I try.
So as we close out here, just what would you say is the most important thing people should know about you and Chicago mobile makers?
I think that it's important for people to know why this is so important. And I think some people look at what we're doing and they say, "Oh, cool! It's it's STEM. STEM is trendy, and we all love STEM." But I actually try not to really use the word STEM because it's so trendy. I see this programming as like essential, especially for Black and Brown communities, because right now we have so many neighborhoods that there's no building, there's no investment, and they're not going to change until, unless the city finally decides to put, an RFQ out, or, there's a lot of waiting around for things to change. And so this is all about getting more people into these industries that, it could be policy making, it could be architecture, it could be engineering, it could be development. But we need to have more people of color, with a seat at the table in these really important, built environment conversations. But then we also need to work from the ground up, where we're giving just regular citizens skills that may improve their lives. Like if you teach someone how to, use a hammer and some wood or something,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe they can add a little addition to their house when they're older. So there are skills that can literally change people's lives, and these skills are also passed down through generations. Like that person might teach their brother to use a hammer, and then that brother teaches his son, or daughter. So these skills are so important, and I think that they will help people build their own communities up, especially when it's like small scale interventions. So it's really important from both sides, the grassroots side and the top down.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is a very cool idea, but it's more essential than cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be woven into the fabric of the education that these young folks are receiving.
Yeah, exactly. I see it as essential, and hopefully it doesn't come down to it where Black and brown people are going to have to rebuild their own communities. Like it's not really, I don't think, their responsibility to do that. But there's been a lot of waiting. I mean, there's been in Chicago, it's been like 50 years of waiting. I mean, these communities have looked the same for that long, and so we need to stop waiting, and we need to just build them ourselves.
So how can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more, if they want to possibly participate in funding? How do they reach you?
Yeah, you can come to our website, chicagomobilemakers.org, or you can email me at maya@chicagomobilemakers.org. Whatever works.
All right. Well, Maya, thanks again for being on Cecil's Unknown Achievers. I know you are super busy, so I thank you very much for the time, and I really enjoyed this and learning about you and your business.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the show. Be sure to check out Maya at Chicago Mobile Makers if you're an educator looking to bring new experiences to your students. Hey, even if you're not an educator and you want to expose youth to architectural and design skills that may open up future opportunities for them, Chicago Mobile Makers is a great source. Until next time, this is Cecil Archbold Jr. with Cecil's Unknown Achievers.